Today we're going to show you how to use a keyhole router bit in your CNC machine so that you can make a keyhole mount on the back of your signs and plaques and other things that you create to make it easier to hang them on the wall. Now, for those of you who don't know what a keyhole bit is, here's the one I'm using from Lowe's. It's an Irwin Marples 3/8 of an inch carbide tip keyhole bit. And basically, this is what it looks like up close. You've got kind of a wide cutting head at the top that narrows down to a narrower cutting head, and it's on a 1/4 inch shaft. So your finished keyhole is going to look like this. It's going to have a 3/8 of an inch diameter in the large part. That's where the screw head will go, and then it's going to plunge down, and the narrower part of the cutting tool is going to cut this slot, and it's going to be hollow underneath for the screw head to slide in, and that's going to make your mount. So what we need to know is for any bit that you use, that we need to find out what some dimensions are on the end mill, and we're going to look at D, E, and C. Okay, so the total diameter in this case is 3/8 of an inch. The cut depth of the keyhole, the large part, is 3/16 of an inch, and the total cutting length of the bit completely is 7/16 of an inch. So what that means is the deepest you can let this bit go down is 7/16 of an inch. Any more than that, then you're going to run out of cutter, and you're going to end up here, and it's just not going to work. So in our case, what we're going to do is we have to go down at least 3/16 of an inch. And if we only go down 3/16 of an inch, all it's going to act like is a 3/8 inch end mill. It's going to leave a slot that's 3/8 of an inch diameter. So in order for the keyhole to work, we have to go down deeper than that. Now, I like to go down for most woods, pine, oak, etc. And if it's a lighter project, I leave usually a 1/16 of an inch of material on this side. So that's how much meat, I guess, would be left, if you want to say that, right here. So we're going to go down so that when this bit passes this direction, the thickness of the wood here is a 1/16 of an inch. Now, if it's a really heavy sign, you may want to go down 1/8 of an inch. So you have a little bit more material here for support for the screw. In this case, I'm just going to use a 1/16 of an inch. So basically, I've got 3/16 for this part plus an additional 1/16. I'm going to go down a 1/4 of an inch, and that's gonna leave me my slot. So at this point, I need to know 1/4 inch cut depth, and I need to know 3/8 inch cutter diameter. Now we're going to go into Cut 2D. This will work with all Vectric programs, whether it's Cut 2D, V Carve, or Aspire. I probably would work with other programs as well. But this, again, I'm just going to show you on the Vectric software. So we're going to create a file, just a 5" by 5" plaque. The material I'm using is a 1/2 inch thick. Now keep in mind that we know we have to get down a 1/4 of an inch in order to get the keyhole effect and leave me a 1/16 of an inch of material. So if with a 1/2 inch, that means I still have a 1/4 of an inch of material that's uncut on the front side. The closer you get to that 1/4 of an inch, the thinner the material is going to be on the other side of the piece, which is the face of your plaque. So if you're doing any engraving or cutting or pocketing on the front of your sign, you need to keep that depth in consideration because you know you're going to have to go down a 1/4 of an inch minimum to make the keyhole bit work. So if you have a 1/2 inch piece of material and you did a pocket, or you have a V carve on the front that went down a 1/4 of an inch, and you're sending the keyhole down a 1/4 of an inch from the back side, there is a possibility that the keyhole will break through to the front, and you'll end up with a hole where you can see right through your piece. So just keep these calculations in mind. I'm using again a 1/2 inch thick material, but you could put whatever your thickness is. We want to make sure that we choose the center of the work material. And the reason we're using the center is because when you flip your sign over, it's very easy to find a center location to zero off your machine. Normally, I might use the lower left, but it's a lot more difficult on a finished sign to accurately get the XY position in the lower left zero. So I just find it easier to use the center. So when I put this board in the machine, I'm going to measure up and down and across to find my center point, and that's where I'm going to zero out my end mill. And we're working in inches. So what we need to do is, let's take a look at the tool paths here for a second. The tool database for Vectric does not have the capability of putting in the profile of a keyhole bit. Because it's an undercut bit, it just doesn't have the capability of doing that. So what I did was I created an end mill that I call a 3/8 of an inch keyhole bit. And I set the diameter to 3/8 of an inch because that's the total cutting diameter, the maximum cutting diameter of the keyhole bit. And then I set it to go down past depth of 1/4 of an inch because I know that that's the minimum depth I need to take that bit in order for it to have a proper keyhole. So you don't need to worry about step over. Spindle speed is up to you. If you have a computer controlled spindle such as the Stepcraft HF500, then you can put in a spindle speed there. My Stepcraft I'm using's got a Cress, so it's a manual speed control. My feed rate I left pretty slow at 15 millimeters a second, and the same for the plunge rate. Now, the keyhole bit has kind of a boring cutter head to it, so it does cut pretty well as you plunge it down, but you can slow this up if necessary for really harder materials, or if you were doing a keyhole in maybe acrylic or something like that, a thick piece of acrylic, you can slow this down so it enters the wood or the material a lot slower, and you may want to slow your feed rate down too. But for this application I was cutting in pine, so these settings worked really well. So that's the bit I'm going to use for this. Now what we need to do is let's take a look at how we have to draw a path for the keyhole to actually work. So you might think that the easiest way to do it is to draw a simple line, right? And then you basically say, I want to start here and I'm going to do a keyhole that's 3/4 of an inch long or whatever. But that's not going to work. And the reason being is that the machine is going to start at the starting point and it's going to plunge down 1/4 of an inch. Then it's going to move to the ending point and it's going to retract. So the Z is going to come up. So you're going to end up with something that looks like a dog bone. You're going to have a circle, a slot, and another circle on the other end, and that's not going to hold anything. So that's not the desired effect we want. So in order to make this work, what we actually need is a path that, I'm going to exaggerate this just so you can see it. We need to bring the bit down the total length that we want to cut. Then we need to go over a small bit, and then we want to come back basically to where we started. And what's going to happen here is the bit's going to go down, it's going to go to the end, move over a little bit, and then come back, and it's going to retract through the same hole. Now this is obviously ridiculously exaggerated, but let me show you how I do this, and it'll make a lot more sense. So what we're going to do is we are going to set the width. We're going to go into draw rectangle, and we're going to set the width to 1/1000th of an inch, 0.001. And we are going to, now as far as the height, the keyhole bit is 3/8 of an inch. So at the center, so what's actually going to happen here is that the path that you make, it's going to go from center to center, right? So the first time I did it, I did a 3/4 of an inch line. So it went down, moved 3/4 of an inch, came back, and then came out of the hole. And it was a decent sized length. The length is up to you, however long you want your keyhole to be. But the minimum that it's going to be is going to be the diameter of the cutter. So because you're going to move down, and then you're going to move up 3/8 of an inch, and then go back, and that's how you're going to end up with this design that they have here. So basically you're going to look at the line you're going to draw starts in the center of this circle and it ends in the center of this circle, right? So if you move this 3/8 of an inch up, this is the slot you're going to have. And basically if you took another circle and you drew a 3/8 inch circle here, then you're going to go from center to center. So 3/8 of an inch is what the minimum you're going to look for a length. Now you could go, we're going to use a 1/2 inch here just for no other reason than it's just a nice round number. And I'm going to click create, and I set my X and 0 here to 0 inches. So that means it's going to put the keyhole slot in the exact center of my workpiece, which is important because I'm already going to zero the tool in the center. So this way my keyhole is in the center. If the keyhole was not in the center, was slightly off, then whatever you're hanging is going to hang crooked, right? So especially if it's a piece that only has one keyhole. Now, if it's a long sign and it's got 2 keyholes in it, well, then, you know, that's okay. You can have it, you know, I guess anywhere you want, as long as your screws in the wall are level, your piece should hang level. But for this purpose, I'm talking about a single keyhole. So what's going to happen here is that the bit is going to go down, it's going to go up, move over 1/1000 of an inch, and come back, and it's going to make a square. Now, I don't need to actually do a full-on square. So what I'm going to do is make some modifications to this. I'm going to cut the bottom of the rectangle. Now, as far as the height, right here, I have it set so that it's going from 1 inch to 1.5 inches above the center point. Again, you can make this anywhere you want, but you do want the keyhole to be in the top half or top third of your workpiece. If you put it in the center and the screw is here, then you know, you're not using gravity or the weight of the piece to keep it vertical, and it could just spin around. So usually you always want to put your keyhole near the top of the workpiece. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in really far here, because remember, this line is only 1/1000 of an inch. So what I want to do is I want to zoom in so that I can see the lines of the rectangle. I'm going to go to the move tool, and I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to use my mouse button. I just want to move the slot over to the center, or get it as best you can. So now everything is working off of the center. Now, granted, it's only 1/1000 of an inch wide, so even if it wasn't on center, it's not going to make a difference at all. You won't notice that when you're mounting this on the wall. Now, I'm going to go to Node Edit, and I want to click on the bottom line here. I want to right-click my mouse, and I want to click Cut Vector. And then what I want to do is I want to go over this green box, and I want to delete that point. And then I want to go to the black box here, and I want to delete that point. So now what I have is I have a path that's set to go up. It's going to go all the way up over 1/1000 of an inch, and then it's going to come back down again. And because the bottom now is open, that my starting point is one side and my ending point is the other. Okay, so it's just going to go up over 1/1000 and down. So that's it. Now we're set. We're ready to just do the toolpath. What we're going to do is go to Profile Toolpath. We're going to make sure that this is selected. We are going to set our cut depth to 1/4 of an inch, because that's what we want. Make sure that we've selected that keyhole bit, which is the 3/8 of an inch. And we're going to do one pass. Oh, it's set it automatically to one pass, because the depth that we set for the tool and the depth we're actually going to cut is the same. Now, if I wanted to go a little deeper here, say I want to go 1/2 inch deep for some reason, the pass would change to 2. So in this case, we're going to do 1/4 of an inch. Now we want to cut on the line. We don't want to cut inside, because that would move the cutter bit over here. We want to, or if we cut outside, it would move it over here. We want to actually cut on the line. We don't need to worry about last pass or tabs or anything like that, so we're going to click Calculate. Now, what's going to happen here is if I do Preview Selected Toolpath, it's going to go by really quick, and you're not going to see what happened. What we want to do is we want to verify that the tool is in fact starting at the bottom of that rectangle where we cut it. Sometimes your starting point could be anywhere else on that line, and you don't want the starting point to be at the top and plunge down and then go down and over. So what we want to do is we always want to verify. So what I do is I turn the speed on the preview all the way down, click Reset Preview, and then do Preview Toolpath. Now you can see it's starting at the bottom and it's working its way up to the top, and I guess this is a little too slow, and then it's going to go all the way back down again, moving over only 1/1000 of an inch, which is going to be virtually unnoticeable, and then it comes up. So here's the problem with Vectric programs. Again, you can't program in the undercut, so this doesn't look like a keyhole, but you have to trust the form of the bit itself is going to take care of making this part here narrower and having the hole. And that's basically it. So now all we have to do is save the toolpath. So to save this, what we're going to do is go to, for our Stepcraft, we're going to look for the Mach 2/3 ARCS millimeters. And we're going to select the toolpath and we're going to save it. I'm just going to put it on the desktop. I'm going to call it Keyhole. And that's it. We'll go to the CNC. Okay, so here's my blank piece that I'm going to be putting a keyhole in. And what I need to do first is measure the center. So it's 5.5. So we're going to go 2 3/4. And the length is 7.5. So we're going to go 3 3/4. And this will be my center point. Now, what I did on this machine was I set up a front rail here that is going to act as a guide, so that if I'm running multiple of these, I can just put them each in and it's automatically going to be in the same spot, so I don't have to re-zero the machine out. I can just put one after another in. I also put 2 bolts on the T-slot track to act as my left guide. So I've got a front guide and a left guide. All I'm going to do here is quickly clamp this down on the back so my workpiece doesn't move, and now I can zero out and there we go. So now we are going to zero all. Okay, so I'm going to raise my Z up a little bit and I'm going to go ahead and start the spindle and I'm going to run the job. And now you can see I have a perfect keyhole in the back of my workpiece.